Haters is a 2024 mystery thriller book by Robyn Harding. So, a fun little fact to know about me. I really enjoy going on Goodreads and reading one-star reviews for popular books. When it comes to media, I'm firmly of the belief that very few books, movies, games, shows, what have you, are truly good or bad. It all depends on your perspective and your preferences. I mentioned in my review for Dead Inside that when I review books, I try not to think of them as good or bad in terms of my opinion of them, but also whether or not they do what they promise to do. I didn't like Dead Inside, for example, but I acknowledged that it was a good extreme horror book because it ticked all the right boxes for extreme horror. Reading one-star reviews of very popular books, you could say, validates my perspective. Even the most popular books in existence have people who passionately hate them. There are no exceptions to this. There is no popular book that does not have at least one extremely verbose review explaining why it's highly overrated and the person doesn't understand why everyone else loves it so much, because it sucks ass. Classics, modern fiction, nonfiction, if it's popular, there's someone who has a very reasoned motivation for hating it. Enter the haters. I've read Robyn Harding's stuff before. The Party, Her Pretty Face, and The Perfect Family were all ones that I enjoyed. I read The Drowning Woman, and I did not like it. Which is hilarious because in looking at the ratings for those books, it would seem as though most readers have the exact opposite opinion of mine. They loved The Drowning Woman and were lukewarm on her other stuff. The premise of The Haters was very interesting to me, particularly as a wannabe author myself, and so I decided to partake. The basic summary of the story is this. A debut author who works as a high school counselor for her day job finds herself receiving some negative comments online about her book. The ones that cut the deepest, though, are the ones that accuse her of using her students' personal stories and traumas as fuel for her book, which she has not done. From there, shit just really tumbles downhill. This book can literally double as an instruction manual on how not to handle criticism. There's a line very early on in the book where the author, Cameron, is reacting to an email criticizing her book and trying to reason out why this person decided to send it to her directly. And she says, maybe it never occurred to her that most writers are sensitive beings. Put a pin in it, we'll come back to it. But the whole situation really snowballs when Cameron's publisher starts deleting particularly abusive comments off a website that I'm 99% sure is meant to be a Goodreads XP. They call it Read'em, but I'm 99% sure it's meant to be Goodreads. That's when the hate really comes flowing in, because now the perception is that the website is censoring negative opinions of Cameron's book. To clarify, the publisher was explicitly targeting reviews that violated the website's code of conduct, so within the context of this book, the intent was not to censor critique, but removing reviews that were telling Cameron to drink bleach. Then Cameron does some snooping and thinks that she finds the woman who sent the original message to her. Cameron lives in Vancouver, just as Robyn Harding does. Pin it, we're coming back to it. But drives across the US border into Washington state to confront the woman, whose photo was stolen by the actual harasser. Cameron, who by this point is definitely being stalked by someone, loses her shit on the woman, who then makes a social media post calling Cameron out on being nuts, which then results in a talk show appearance where the woman continues to talk shit. I cannot stress enough that this was not helped, in large part, by part of Cameron's freakout involving the negative reaction to her book. So now Cameron's been dropped by her publisher and she's desperate. A fellow author recommends a cyber detective of sorts who ends up doing some snooping into that one commenter who seems to be at the center of the backlash. And from there, I shall decline to delve into the big reveal regarding who, if anyone, is stalking and specifically trying to destroy Cameron's life. That will be for you to discover if you so choose to read the book. Given how this novel unfolds, I thought it would be fun to not strictly critique it from a writing or storytelling perspective, but also to break down the overall narrative surrounding being an author, criticism, and book world. But first, I'll hit up the broader aspects of the book since it's going to be a lot quicker. The mystery thriller aspect of the book was kind of weak. It's definitely more mystery than thriller, but so much of this novel concerns itself with Cameron's personal issues rather than the mystery itself. I had a feeling we were coming back to it's definitely someone in Cameron's life that's screwing with her, and though I'll again decline to give away the final twist, it is someone she's acquainted with who is causing her some level of trouble. Sincerely, though, if you read the book, you know that that's the direction we're heading in. It would have been more shocking if it ended up being a total stranger. The characters were meh. Cameron was the one we see the most of, and she's a very well-developed character, I'll give him that. I also see evidence of Robyn Harding's talent for creating nuanced, flawed, and frustrating characters here, but I'm going to get more into that later on. Because the story is so focused on Cameron, the other characters don't really feel as fleshed out as they could be. The writing overall was good. That's what I've come to expect from this author. She is a talented writer and is generally good at showing and telling at appropriate levels. On to the book world stuff. First, allow me to start with Cameron's missteps. One, as a budding professionally published author, it may not be a good idea to have an email available to the general public as a mechanism for receiving feedback, because you will not just get fan mail. You have a publisher, a team, and an agent. Let them figure out if your book is getting any significant pushback or valid criticism, and have them convey it to you until you've developed a thick enough skin to not spiral into a neurotic mess at every stinging critique you receive. Now, in fairness, not everyone has a team. If you're independently published, you're probably going to need to keep a closer eye on comments to see how your work is hitting. But still, having an email open for just anyone to submit seems like a great way to turn your phone or computer into an anxiety box. Or more of one than it already is. Might be better to have a blog where people can leave comments just so there's a layer of removal between the criticism and you. Put it in a place where you have to go looking for it rather than just having it at your fingertips instantly. I could sum up one of Cameron's biggest missteps in this book just being that she cannot stop looking at the criticism, like she's doom scrolling. It's not like she's, deliberately trying to understand why people are making these criticisms. She's just torturing herself by looking at all of the hate that she's receiving. Slightly off topic, but I used to be a fanfiction writer, and people dunk on fanfiction, but all of those years writing it anonymously gave me a much thicker skin against the absolutely unhinged sorts of criticism and personal attacks that can get thrown around in fandom spaces. I am not kidding when I say that some of the shit that gets flung is absolutely vicious, and it's much more personal since fandom often functions as communities of people intensely dedicated to what's being written about. Writing my own original works with the intention of putting something dangerously close to my real name on them is intimidating, I won't lie, but at least I've already bypassed the cringy, sensitive artiste please no bully phase that Cameron seems to be possessed of in this novel. Actually, let me double back to that quote real quick for a second. Maybe it never occurred to her that most writers are sensitive beings. This is Cameron complaining about the person who initially gives the critique. I don't know who needs to hear this, but it doesn't matter. Your feelings don't matter. You put something out into the world for public consumption, and that means that the public has a right to critique it. And they don't have to be nice while they're doing it, sorry. If you can't cope with that reality, then don't publish. I'm not kidding. There is nothing more ridiculous than seeing an author throw a hissy fit on social media and wail about review bombing because a small handful of people had the audacity not to shower them in praise. Another failure, which I don't blame Cameron for really because she was explicitly advised against it, was not nipping the question of whether or not she took inspiration specifically from her own students in the bud from the beginning. If it was me, if I was in Cameron's place and I was being accused of using my students' personal stories as fuel for my book, I would very simply say this. Hey guys, just saw some things and I want to clear the air. I work as a school counselor, but I did not base anything in Burnt Orchid on my own students. In the course of my studies for this job, I've done a lot of classes, training, and research on the issues that affect teenagers, such as homelessness, abuse, and drug use. I did not use my students' lives for my book because I didn't have to. I have plenty of other material to work with. Simple and effective. You took the wind out of the sails of the worst of the criticisms because anyone with half a brain is going to go, oh, right, yeah, she probably does have to do all that stuff to become a counselor. Never mind the proliferation of biographies put out for public consumption that detail all of these social issues and more that could just as easily have been referenced or used as, fodder for the book. Of course, there will still be some smooth brains who stomp their feet and insist you're evil, but you staved off the meatiest of the criticisms in a calm, confident way. Incidentally, it is her inability to let those pointed criticisms go or respond to them succinctly that spurs her publisher to talk to the Goodreads XP, again, it's called Read'em in the book, to take the particularly vicious comments down. It's made clear that these are comments that violate the website's term of service by making personal attacks and such, and we are led to assume that this is true. But it provokes even more backlash when the reviewers perceive that they are being censored. Next mistake, crossing international borders to scream at a woman who makes it clear pretty quickly that she's not the droid you're looking for. Yeah, no, I totally get why Cameron's keyed up. Again, she is actually being stalked at this point of the book, or it seems that she is. She's under a lot of pressure, but also she was weird and threatening and kind of nuts in how she came across in this interaction. It is understandable, at least on some level. I don't have the brain rot app. Y'all operate on a different level than me. Why this lady might feel compelled to make a TikTok about Cameron showing up and freaking out on her. I personally would just call cops, but okay. A lot of Cameron's flaws as a character come from the fact that she seems incapable of just shutting off social media and not looking at the reviews for her book when she knows she's getting loads of negative feedback. Had she just ignored this from the beginning or just dropped that simple, easy breezy explanation for how she definitely didn't profit off of her students, then things would probably not have unfolded this way. Again, as difficult as it is as a creator to put your heart and soul into something and then watch it get torn to shreds, it's important to recognize that this is the result of putting your work out into the world. You cannot open your work up to the public and then throw a tantrum when you don't get rainbows and sunshine in response. No one is obligated to kiss your ass, and frankly, I think we all know that you probably have one or two books, movies, TV shows, songs, or video games that you hate with a passion and will happily shit talk if you get the chance. And that's someone else's precious creation too. So moving on from Cameron's Aesop lesson about how not to author. Something that I questioned regularly throughout this novel was the author's intent. As I said in the intro, I've read Robyn Harding's books before, and she has a very, very good talent for writing complex characters. Utterly shitty human beings, dare I say. Real ding-dongs. And in those books I read, I detected nothing but self-awareness that these characters are being written as incredibly flawed people who weren't 100% right or wrong. A lot of how I picked up on this is that Harding tends to feature multiple character perspectives in her books, and often those perspectives butt heads with one another. It creates a really beautiful tapestry of fucked upness, exquisitely executed. To create a group of characters and hear them ruthlessly criticize one another strongly suggests that the author understands what sort of characters she's created. However, in this book, Cameron's perspective is the only one, and I did question how much of her sensitive artiste behavior I was meant to sympathize with and how much of it I was meant to interpret as her being overly sensitive. Clearly, Harding has some self-awareness about Cameron's handling of the situation because it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Cameron isn't really getting rewarded for her behavior, and she's not avoiding consequences either. So I have to assume that it's because the author herself recognizes the pitfalls in her behavior. And yet, there was something about the way that her controversies were handled in this book that hit my ear funny. There are multiple points in this book where the subject of internet review websites, review bombing, harassment, and trolls are explained with almost like after school special energy, if you get what I'm saying. Very turn to the camera and educate the audience about this social issue kind of energy. And additionally, the way that the subject of authors being canceled or just behaving badly is discussed in this book is very biased, honestly. And I don't mean biased as in Cameron the character is biased, but biased as in Harding seems, I want to emphasize seems, to want us to sympathize with the authors and not the people criticizing them. I want to emphasize that that is my interpretation, not necessarily what Harding was going for. I am not a mind reader, I could be wrong. But part of why I interpret it this way is the framing. None of the authors Cameron speaks to or reference in this book were in controversy because of their own stupid behavior. It's because of poor wording, or misunderstanding, or racism, or sexism. It's never because the author made a major misstep and had to take some legitimate, painful criticism for it. It's because everyone else overreacted, or everyone else was maliciously targeting the author for things beyond their control. Now, this is just somewhat at odds with my experience of authors getting canceled. I'm just going to name a few of the really big ones off the top of my head here. We have Neil Gaiman, who is currently being canceled for the sexual assault allegations that have been lodged against him on social media and in civil court. We have Kate Corain, I could be mispronouncing her name, I apologize, who used sock puppet accounts to leave nasty reviews on other authors' books. We have Richard Britton, who stalked a critic, went to her workplace, and hit her over the head with a bottle. We have Lauren Huff, again, I could be mispronouncing that last name, sorry, who threw a fit when people gave her books 4-star reviews instead of 5, and proceeded to respond to every single provocation that was thrown her way on Twitter afterwards until she got a friend to block people for her. Similarly, Sarah Stusek flipped out at a reviewer who gave a glowing 4-star review instead of 5, and Sarah Stusek proceeded to act like the reviewer in question had just shit on her doorstep and called her a whore or something. And of course, we have Kathleen Hale, who, in reviewing the details of what she did, sounds like Robyn Harding might have taken a lot of inspiration from her story. Effectively, Kathleen Hale had a bone to pick with a particular woman who left a bad review criticizing her book. Like Cameron, she went out of her way to research this particular critic, somehow managing to wrangle this woman's actual address and thereby finding her in a phone book, which led to the critic's actual name, which then prompted Hale to pay for a goddamn background check to be done on her. Then she rented a car, drove to the woman's house, looked at her through the window, left a book on her front doorstep, and then tried to call her pretending to be someone else. Then she wrote a book called Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker. Understand me, Kathleen Hale wrote a book called Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker. And the only reason we know about this saga is because Kathleen Hale wrote an article about it in The Guardian. I will link it in the description. Those are just a handful of examples, but I think you see where I'm going with this. While there are undoubtedly some authors who get shat on because they tweeted something that people didn't like, or because they wrote a book that rubbed people the wrong way, or because they exist in the young adult space and an unfortunate number of people there are borderline psychopaths who chew glass with a crunch or some shit. Tangent, sorry. But also you get one guess as to which age group Kathleen Hale's original book was written for. I swear there is something in the fucking water in YA Twitter. The point I'm making is that while some authors are unfairly canceled or attacked, there are also a lot of examples where the author did make some very serious missteps or even outright committed crimes. And as you might have noticed, a chunk of the missteps I mentioned above involved authors throwing whole-ass temper tantrums because they received a negative review, or just a review that wasn't 100% positive. Now, I might not second-guess this if Robyn Harding weren't, an author who has undoubtedly dealt with unpleasant people on the internet before. To the best of my knowledge, she hasn't been canceled before, but hell if I know, I generally stay the fuck away from social media, and my life is all the happier for it. But when I see a PSA paragraph about trolls that serves no practical purpose but to educate the audience, particularly highlighting that they often target vulnerable people, I think she may have even specified that they tend to target autistic people. I'm a jackass. I didn't copy down the quote. I'm sorry. I start to wonder if the author legitimately lacks the ability to understand the difference between a troll and a person who leaves a very mean review about a book. Because I find that a lot of people nowadays struggle with that difference. The number of times I've seen public figures, not just authors, but public figures and creators sweep away all criticism as, oh, it's the trolls, it's just the trolls are harassing us because they're mean, is ridiculous. Yes, trolls are absolutely a thing and they suck, but also you're mixing them up with actual criticism. And like I mentioned with Lauren Huff, it does not help when the trolls throw out the most piddling, nothing burger bait and you strap on the bib and... Seriously, trolls want a reaction. Like wildlife, feeding them is the worst thing you can do if you want them to fuck off. Additionally, as it comes up a few times in this book, the term review bombing is a controversial one for me. I got accused of review bombing a book once, and it was because I left a negative review of it. Because I didn't like it, and I had criticisms of it. But someone, not the author, it was another reviewer, got their panties in a twist over the fact that I had given a negative review to a book that they obviously liked a lot, and apparently that means I was review bombing, not expressing my own personal opinion on the book. I agree that review bombing is a thing in the Kate Corain sense. She was creating sock puppet accounts for the purposes of leaving multiple negative reviews on specific authors, and she did it, allegedly, with the intention of sabotaging them. I even agree with the concept of review bombing in the Sarah Stusek sense, which is the sort that Cameron goes through in the novel, where she has one blow up and people proceed to leave dozens of one-star reviews on a book they haven't read just for spite's sake. But in general, I find that a lot of authors and even other reviewers abuse the term review bombing because they're mad about people leaving negative reviews on their book or a book that they just really like. The big point that I'm trying to get at here is that I do wonder if maybe Robyn Harding might be injecting some of her personal, perhaps biased attitudes as an author towards these topics. Because there does seem to be a fairly one sided depiction of negative online reviewers. And while Cameron's behavior is not necessarily validated, again, her situation gets worse and worse, so that implies that the author has self awareness that Cameron is not handling things correctly. I still get this kind of sense that I'm meant to take this slanted view of online criticism at face value. Remember, I like Robyn Harding specifically because she's so good at writing shithead characters, so I'm really trying to analyze this with that in mind, but there's just so much, like, PSA for internet illiterate boomers level explanations of online stuff, and none of the other authors mentioned in this book did anything to warrant backlash. It always seems to be pushed off on everyone else for being jerks. I don't know, that just kind of rings to me like I'm meant to come away with viewing authors as the victims of online mobs. And again, while I don't question that some authors have been unfairly attacked for things just not worth being attacked over, I also know that there are loads of authors who flip their lids and accuse readers of bullying them by leaving negative reviews. I don't know. I'm trying real hard to give Harding the benefit of the doubt here, but I sense a little preaching going on. This could have been mitigated by having other perspectives to offer contrary opinions to Cameron's, but there aren't, so that's just kind of my read of it. And it doesn't have to be a one or the other thing. It could be that Harding is just kind of on Cameron's side in the sense that she's in Cameron's head, so she, is naturally writing Cameron as being a biased character in that respect. And maybe a little bit of Harding's individual biases are kind of creeping in there, but I don't know. That's just how I'm reading it. Overall, it's not a bad book. I do have a love of stories where I watch bad or stupid characters fall prey to their own behavior because the author knows what kind of person they're writing. But kind of the low-level whitewashing of controversy and backlash in book world just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth.